Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this concluding event of the Neubauer Collegium project on democracy and capitalism. My name is James Sparrow. I'm a faculty member in the history department, and I'm one of the three principal investigators for the Democracy and Capitalism project, along with John Levy and Chiara Cordelli. I want to start by thanking some really great people who made this possible. That has no significance, ignore that. I'd like to thank Kevin Cromash, who's our coordinator for the democracy curriculum, and the terrific team of people at the Neubauer Collegium who've really made this whole year an extraordinary experience for us. Rachel Johnson, Mark Sorkin, Elspeth Carruthers, and of course the director, Tara Zara, and the outgoing director, Jonathan Lear, who was originally involved in our proposal. So I just want to tell you a little bit about the project and then hand you over to our speaker. The central concern of democracy and capitalism is to explore the intersections of those two major political and economic patterns in US history. The topic might seem to be a no-brainer, in the United States at least. Since the Cold War, democracy and capitalism have been treated as naturally co-occurring phenomena, if not tantamount to each other. The ideological crucible of Soviet containment welded an iron hyphen between the terms liberal and democracy, naturalizing a very particular political economy and subordinating the unruly aspects of self-government to the ordered liberty of market society. For understandable reasons, scholars repudiated the preachments of Cold War civics, particularly after the Vietnam War, and then mounting inequality since then, compounded by the radical destabilization of the 2008 crisis and the democratic erosion that we see all around us today, all of these things together have only served to further bracket our understandings of market society and self-government. So that's left us 5 decades later with robust scholarly literatures that usually presume that capitalism and democracy are largely, if not entirely, orthogonal to each other. But of course, their histories are far too intertwined for us to continue proceeding in this schizophrenic manner, hence the purpose of our project. In December, we had a conference on the agonistic dimensions of democratic government and capitalist society with a focus on the US and Europe. In January, we had a lively and well-attended talk by Luca Fantacci on cryptocurrency and its governance. And on Monday, James on the origins of international institutions of economic governance in the interwar period. So today we continue our exploration of these themes by turning to two captains of industry, Elon Musk and Henry Ford, whose business strategies, public personas, and political interventions had major implications for the trajectory of democracy in America. To educate our thinking about these two larger-than-life figures, we've invited a speaker whose expertise is uniquely suited to the task, David Kirsch, seated in the front. David is an associate professor of strategy and entrepreneurship at the Robert H. Smith School of Business and the College of Information Studies, the I-School, at the University of Maryland, College Park. His research focuses on the intersection of problems of innovation and entrepreneurship, technological and business failure, and industry emergence and evolution. Kirsch has written about the history of alternatives to internal combustion in his book, The Electric Vehicle and the Burden of History, and about the general problem of speculation around technology in financial markets in his second book, Bubbles and Crashes, The Boom and Bust of Technological Innovation. In 2020 and 2022, he was a visiting fellow at Brasenose College, Oxford. Please join me in welcoming David Kirsch.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I don't know where. I think it'll stay there. Hopefully, it won't fall over. So, hope everyone can see okay, can hear me. thank you. It's a real pleasure to be back at the Neubauer Collegium, to see some familiar faces, and it's always, you know, Jim, you always come up with challenging topics that are exciting for us to engage. So it's really a pleasure, and thank you for organizing. I'm going to go back and forth a little bit here between some written notes and some extemporaneous remarks as I walk you through some evidence. So if you don't like the style you're hearing, be patient, it'll change. I will say, you know, my background, Jim mentioned this, but sort of conspired to bring me here today. I've written 2 books, each historical inquiries that sought to answer basic social science questions. The Electric Vehicle and the Burden of History arose from a question over lunch at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis in Vienna, Luxembourg, when transportation and diffusion scholar Arnulf Gruber asked me if anyone had ever looked into Brian Arthur's claim that the dominance of internal combustion over steam was the result of accidental, unrelated events. Arthur, I don't know if people have heard this story, Arthur had conjectured that an outbreak of hoof and mouth disease in 1912, which closed the watering troughs along the eastern seaboard, had disadvantaged the steam cars and somehow led to the dominance of internal combustion. It took about a week of work to prove that Arthur was wrong. Lock-in, the process of path-dependent technological choice that resulted in the triumph of internal combustion, happened as long as a decade prior to Arthur's hoof and mouth disease outbreak. At that time, Ford was producing more Model Ts in a single day than the entire steam vehicle industry was producing in a year. So steam and internal combustion vehicles were actually very similar. The real competitor to internal combustion was the electric vehicle, and that led to that book. The second book, Bubbles and Crashes, until the final stages of publication, was titled When Are There Not Bubbles? So it was this kind of riff on this the identification of the problem that most studies of bubbles sample on the dependent variable. They just take bubbles and look at bubbles, and so the book had this conceit that we would look at lots of different technologies, some of which led to bubbles, some of which didn't. And of course, we have a bubble in Tesla stock, or I have suggested we have a bubble in Tesla stock. So here we have, we'll get there. You know, the electric vehicle meets bubbles in the person of Elon Musk and Tesla. So that's kind of how we got here. I'll just give you a little sort of roadmap, talk a little bit about the concept of celebrity, then talk about our 2 sort of protagonists. I'll make some general observations. I'll give you my questions, the things I'm struggling to understand, and then obviously I'm very eager to hear yours. So, as the title suggests of today's talk, I'll propose some similarities between Ford and Musk. I want to acknowledge in advance that historical research does not work this way. So I'm not a Lincoln Kennedy coincidence person. Further, as a trained and card-carrying cultural historian of technology, I want to be clear, I'm not especially interested in Ford and Musk as great men, as sort of trans-historical figures whose accomplishments and peculiarities matter more than those of the multitudes whose lives shaped and were shaped by those accomplishments and peculiarities. Instead, I'd like to use this comparison of their 2 professional trajectories as instances of the celebrity CEO. And celebrity, which I'm using here as a social attribute rather than a noun, describing any particular individual or social actor, is connected with ideas of fame and acclaim, and combines aspects of being known or seen with the idea of being admired. To have celebrity is to be both widely known and admired. Though often discussed as an attribute of a single social actor, celebrity is fundamentally relational. Celebrity attaches to a social actor who is celebrated by a specific audience. Importantly, in addition to being known and admired, celebrity also requires the entity in question to participate in some form of dramatic narrative. In this respect, celebrity is both relational and dynamic. Celebrity arises in the context of social actions that are visible to this intended audience. So TMZ and People magazine are instrumental to Hollywood and its audience, just as CNBC and the Wall Street Journal are central to the creation and maintenance of celebrity in the business community. Now, we don't have great histories of celebrity itself. It's kind of typically treated in the context of media, the rise of Hollywood movies, etc. Recent years, however, have witnessed the rise of the celebrity firm. The concept of the celebrity CEO encompasses several types of social actors. CEOs of celebrity firms may or may not themselves be celebrities. So Apple's Tim Cook, seen here, were he the CEO of a non-celebrity firm, we may reasonably question how much we would know about him. He does not present himself as a particularly charismatic or celebrated person. Most of his visibility and acclaim come from his association with Apple, an exemplar celebrity firm. At the other extreme are celebrity leaders who are renowned regardless of their official firm. So a figure like Chainsaw Al Dunlop was widely admired among activist investors for his ruthless cost-cutting and efficiency, regardless of the specific firm he was running. However, the largest group of celebrity CEOs are individuals who are associated with and known for running visible celebrity firms. Firms that, by virtue of having traced a visible and widely followed dramatic arc, stand apart from others in their industry. Tech giants like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and Apple all fit in this category. These firms have built the modern infrastructure we associate with the internet age, and their CEOs, regardless of their individual attributes, will be accorded some degree of celebrity. And I use Sheryl Sandberg here, even though she's not the CEO, she is certainly accorded a lot of celebrity and listened to for her opinions on things that may have nothing to do with running a business. So these are merely some initial observations, more definitional for our purposes than analytic, but I will suggest that for scholars of capitalism, the issue of celebrity is both important and understudied. I'd be delighted if today's talk spurs an outstanding young doctoral student to explore the question of business celebrity and capitalism more thoroughly. Okay, so let's turn to Ford. Ford was among the first, if not the first, true celebrity CEOs. Didn't have that title, but that was the role he inhabited. Unlike the great 19th century captains of industry, like Vanderbilt, Carnegie, or Rockefeller, Ford came to prominence producing and selling a product for the masses. Much has been written about the Model T. I will not try to summarize the influence of Model T on America and the automobile industry, but I will share one curious finding that you may not know and that I learned thanks to the good efforts of a former doctoral student, Julie Sharrock, who systematically collected and coded joke books about the automobile as a way to explore early cultural meanings of new technology. And here you can see she found 2,627 automobile jokes. And they apparently, humor scholars are accustomed to this. They come in waves. They're joke waves.
What was the best one?
Well, I'll share a couple. So Sharrock found that prior to the introduction of Model T, most jokes about the automobile focused on danger and fear. This was the era of Michael Berger's The Devil Wagon in God's Country, with the cultural trope of the entrepreneur serving as the principal villain. Sharrock writes, quote, "Chauffeurs were reckless, cavalier, remorseless, not to be trusted, and certainly not to be left alone with one's daughters," unquote. The public was scared of the car, and this fear was reflected in the jokes they told about it. So here's one of the joke books, a bunch of horseless nonsense. The car is, and the chauffeur are sort of, have this devilish visage. And here's a sample joke. The judge, did you give the victim any warning? Chauffeur, ample. I passed the identical spot the previous day. You don't have to laugh, but that's what passed as humor. However, soon after the introduction of Model T, automobile humor started to reflect a warmer, more approachable view of the car. Sharrock concludes, quote, "The portrayal of morally deficient chauffeurs as a proxy for and personification of the technology did not extend to the Model T. To the contrary, Model T was instead frequently personified as an unruly but beloved child," unquote. So here's the sample Model T joke. This was actually a riff on a song, I didn't raise my boy to be a soldier, so I didn't raise my Ford to be a jitney. There, little Ford, don't you cry, you'll be a jitney bus by and by. So again, this idea of this sort of docile, slightly, unruly child that was needed to be cared for. So it really is hard to overstate the importance of Model T. As Sharrock shows, it literally domesticated the automobile in American society and culture. For our celebrity theory, Ford's personal acclaim as the commercial innovator of this miraculous technology is, I think, understandable. Early on, Ford also engaged in oppositional framing, opting not to pay the per-vehicle licensing fees demanded by the Association of Licensed Automobile Manufacturers, the residual rights holder of the infamous Selden patent. Ford rightly perceived that ALAM licensing had done little to improve quality or otherwise legitimate the auto producers associated with it, and chose to take them on. So here you see these two advertisements that actually appeared next to each other in Cycle and Automobile Trade Journal. On the left is the notice from the Association of Licensed Automobile Manufacturers, all the sort of known names, Haynes Apperson, Autocar, Olds, Packard, Winton, who were paying the licensing fee and saying, you need to only buy from us. And then on the right is Ford saying, dealers, importers, anyone, I will pay your legal bills if you fight, if you run into any trouble, and sort of using this oppositional, right next to each other in the journal, to really take on the elites, this sort of Eastern establishment. So from a celebrity theory perspective, Ford's stance against the ALAM generated a dramatic narrative in which the Ford Motor Company was the underdog, standing up to the moneyed Eastern monopolists. For Ford, it was right on brand. Also along these lines, Donald Finlay Davis's thoughtful and underappreciated conspicuous production describes the efforts of many of Ford's contemporaries to use their automobile businesses as engines of social advancement. Most early Detroit car makers built increasingly feature-laden and expensive cars to appeal to their social betters in the Detroit social scene, hoping to be included at their parties, welcomed into their social clubs, and perhaps eventually invited to marry their daughters. By contrast, Ford took pains to remain apart. His focus on efficiency and cost minimization led him to move aggressively down market, away from the Detroit elites whom Finlay Davis's conspicuous producers were courting. Gradually, the upscale markets dried up, and Ford's relentless cost and price cutting prevented those manufacturers from recovering from their early missteps. Most failed quickly, some failed slowly. Ford's disdain for Detroit society, which supported the dramatic narrative of Ford Motor Company standing apart from the rest of the industry, again reinforced his and his firm's celebrity. Ironically, of course, within a decade or two, the Ford family was synonymous with Detroit elite, and today the Ford name is attached to the most prestigious social institutions in the city. Finally, we come to Ford's media dalliance, the saga of the Dearborn Independent, beginning in 1919 and continuing through the 1920s. It's a sad and depressing story that gave the world the International Jew without copyright, seeding untold thousands of derivative works that continue to circulate in racist, anti-Semitic circles to this day. As one poster on Stormfront, an online community of white nationalists, wrote in 2019, several years ago, "I'm currently reading The International Jew, Essays from the Dearborn Independent. Read these great books. We, the white race, need to encourage ourselves and our children," unquote. Bill McGraw, former editor of the Dearborn Historian, in a recent essay about Ford and the Dearborn Independent concluded, quote, "While anti-Semitism goes back centuries, Ford's salvos were likely the most sustained printed attacks on Jews the world had ever seen. With his wealth and resources, Ford remains the most formidable anti-Semite in American history." There you have it. For our purposes, the immediate causes of Ford's anti-Semitism are less important than seeing how his media misadventures fit with our picture of Ford's evolving celebrity. The extreme nature of the claims that appeared in the Dearborn Independent, starting soon after his editorial staff was encouraged to, quote, "find an evil to attack," led to widespread public condemnation. New York Rabbi Stephen Weiss called Ford, quote, "the most contemptible little liar that ever lived," and unquote, and Jewish interests organized a boycott of Ford's vehicles. This negative public attention was new for Ford. Eventually, a delicate rapprochement was achieved, and in 1927, the Dearborn Independent was shuttered, though in the words of historian Vicky Sakarwisty, the decision to close the paper was, quote, "disingenuous," because Ford knew that thousands of copies of the International Jew had already been distributed. His public persona at this point had come full circle. Although many would always see Ford positively as a celebrity, in other circles, his legacy would be one of infamy, its opposite. Okay, so let's turn now to Elon Musk. As noted at the outset, we do not yet have the perspective necessary to properly contextualize Musk as a historic actor. He's very much still alive and shaping his historical legacy with every tweet. But I believe we can map some similarities between the two men, allowing us to explore how the canonical celebrity CEO of the late 2010s and today compares to the original model. So first, I'd like to give Musk some due. Like Ford, he's been remarkably successful. I've several times made public statements questioning Tesla's strategy, and I can now publicly admit that I underestimated his firm's ability to successfully navigate the production hell associated with scaling, initially the Model 3 and later the best-selling Model Y. So what you see here, I'm going to transition. What you see here is data. This is from late 2021. The numbers, all the valuations have come down a bit, but the ratios are still pretty similar. So on the left, this is Tesla making about 1.5 million cars per year. On the right are the 10 largest incumbent other auto manufacturers making around 50 million units per year. And you can see that their market capitalizations are approximately equal. So this was the bubble that got my attention. I couldn't quite see how you get from this to, even with a lot of growth, to some rational valuation. But this is Musk's success. This is, and he's made some people very rich, including himself, by doing this. He also engaged in this oppositional framing we saw with Ford. So he sued to be able to sell directly to consumers. So he had these petitions. This was a change.org petition to the Obama White House that accumulated over 100,000 signatures. In the article where it's reporting about the Tesla shareholder meeting, he says clearly, if democracy was working properly and the legislators were implementing the will of the people, something else would be happening, and there would not be legislation trying to artificially restrict direct sales. So this was, this was his attempt, again, to, like Ford, to kind of appeal directly to consumers and to kind of take on these institutional barriers that he saw as standing in the way of consumer welfare. And by the mid-2010s, Tesla could sell direct in 25 states. It's a little higher now. Musk also exists in the era of social media. So these are this is just a word cloud of Elon's about 12,000 tweets from 2010 to 2021, a little bit outside the data I'm about to share with you are 2010 to 2020. And this is the rise in his followers. You can see early on, he was not a Twitter native. So Twitter launches in 2007, and up through these early years, he's not particularly active or accumulating a lot of followers. But it does offer him the possibility to sort of build a narrative. So for the story, for the celebrity, there's this very obvious, Twitter is great for drama in that sense. And I'll just share one little curio that I found in the course of this work, which is that we discovered, so we scraped all the tweets that included the cash tag TSLA, the Tesla stock ticker. And we found these 8 accounts that were created within 75 minutes of each other on one night, November 7th, 2013. And over the ensuing 7 years, we found that they would tweet a total of about 25,000 times. And the content was stuff like this: TSLA, keeping this on watch, starting to get interesting, hit my list a few days ago, hitting buzz. A lot of talk around this one, sort of just very, nothing substantive, just trying to get it on people's radar. And if you look, this Dan Rock's account, this is a histogram of when that account tweets. And you can see that over a space of 7 years, it tweets every 3 hours. And that was cued me to the likelihood that this was not a human. This was, since most people sleep at least in blocks of more than 3 hours. So this was kind of puzzling to us, and we started looking a little more deeply at it, and we found an IS tool to help us evaluate, is a particular account a bot or not? And it goes from 0 to 5. If you put, Jim Sparrow's Twitter in there, you'll get, a 0 maybe because there's no Twitter. That's fine too. But I'm sure everyone in this room, if you put your ID into the botometer, you will come back human, very human. And all of these accounts came back, 4.9 out of 5, very highly suggested that these were bots. So this was puzzling to us. And we then went back and looked at what was happening. So the bots were created, remember, on November 7th in 2013. And we discovered that a few weeks prior, there'd been a Tesla Model S that had crashed and caught fire. And a few weeks after that, there was another one. There was a crash, hit a concrete wall, high speed, and then a third one. And what was interesting here with this third one, this is from USA Today, read the headline, Feds review third Tesla fire as shares fall again. So the story was changing. And so we interpret these bots as interventions to take control of the story. And you could think of the battery fires as kind of a counter-narrative. Up until that time, Tesla had this story about their battery technology being very novel and exciting. It was part of the dramatic narrative of the firm. And if you think about it, there were everything here above the line, these sort of blue-green ones are all the good stories, the positive dramatic narrative. Each one was associated with a potential counter-narrative. And so this particular counter-narrative, the battery fires counter-narrative, was at risk of becoming salient and kind of taking off and punching through. So to control the narrative, they deployed the bots. And just to give you a little more kind of color for these activities, this is we looked at the 1,000 most active accounts in the TSLA corpus, and on the left, and just made a histogram of their bottometer score. And so what you see is it's bimodal. There's a group. These are the individuals, what we would call the fanboys, who are excited and love Elon and support whatever he does. And then over here, these are the fan bots, and obviously fewer of them because they don't sleep. So yeah, the fanboys, these are the kind of humans, and then the fan bots are producing what we would call corporate computational propaganda. And I will just say, this is 2013 that we're initially observing these activities. This is well before the political computational propaganda that comes to the fore in 2016 with the Russians and Trump, and et cetera. So this is what's sort of how Elon Musk is building his celebrity, managing his celebrity through this period. So finally, we get to Elon Musk's media dalliance. And this was from the New York Times in April of last year, a little over a year ago. And I said, why Twitter? And this was just from this article. The LA Times had written an article about our work. And it says, whatever Musk's public statements, it bears noting that, this was me saying this, no one has profited more from the existence of Twitter than Elon Musk. And I'm, certainly more than Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter. He made maybe $1 billion, but Musk has, made $200 billion. I said Donald Trump used Twitter to win the presidency, but Elon Musk used it to sustain the Tesla narrative and to support the stock when the company was in danger of collapse. So that's my suggestion to you. I cannot prove it. I'm working hard, but I can't. I don't have causality. It doesn't. We're getting there. Stay tuned. But this is my claim, and I do think it then does raise the question: why did he do it? He'd already gotten the most he could get from this. He was the richest man in the world before he announced his intention to acquire Twitter. And this is the sort of hard part. Like Ford, Musk plays with the racists. So this is there was a tweet, something about, I forget what the tweet was in response to, and Musk says, I wonder what Earth will be like 88 million years from now. And turns out 88, for those of you who don't know, is code for Heil Hitler, the H. And so this person that replies to it, been thinking about this 14 times daily, and 14 as this magic code for this 14 words that the white supremacists say, keep the America safe and our children white, or something. I forget what it is. You look up 14 words, white nationalism, you'll get, I don't want to know it. And this poster is using the Pepe the Frog, this kind of racist trope that gets co-opted by the white nationalists about a decade ago. And then you see over here in the comments, so one says, Musk and his reply guys just getting more and more bold with the far-right dog whistles. And then someone says, WTF, I mean, you can take the boy out of apartheid. So Musk was raised in apartheid South Africa. But you can't take the apartheid out of the boy. And then says, next reply says, I effing hate that I know what these really mean. So again, this kind of coded, Henry Ford never signed the editorials, the anti-Semitic editorials. It was very clear he was paying for them. That was his message. Elon Musk is not saying Heil Hitler, but he's, kind of dancing with this crowd. And if I share this tweet with you and you scroll down, just below it are all the Musk apologists. Oh, you guys are going crazy. Why are you saying that's not what he's saying at all. It was 88 million years because that's a da-da-da-da-da. So anyway, this is the part I can't understand. In the same way that we can't really I don't think we can ever really understand why Ford was such an anti-Semite. You know, I come back to he made $1 trillion. Isn't that enough? So anyway, that's where I think I come to. I'm going to now go back to reading a little bit. How are we doing on time? Okay. So I do have a few, hopefully slightly more ordered thoughts to share. So first, as we try to see the world through the eyes of Henry Ford in the spirit of a sort of good historian's hermeneutic exercise, I think we should assume that the same factors that led Ford to publicly challenge the monopoly of the ALAM, that disinclined him from following his status-seeking Detroit peers and moving up market, that drove the relentless pursuit of efficiency and scale, which forced so many other early automakers from the market, and that also blinded him to the nature of the challenge posed by General Motors under the leadership of Alfred P. Sloan in the 1920s, that these same factors also informed his decisions concerning the Dearborn Independent. In this way, we should see his perception of the importance of public opinion and public approval, his independence and self-confidence in charting the path to mass production and mass automobilization, and ultimately his industrial and financial success as inseparable from his defiant and unapologetic anti-Semitism. They are two sides of the same coin. From celebrity to infamy, that's the celebrity CEO who Ford was across the first third of the 20th century. Similarly, as we look at Elon Musk, although we have yet to reach the first anniversary of Musk's acquisition of Twitter, let that sink in, we can anticipate at least some of history's judgment. We should presume that the same factors that led Musk to reason from fundamentals about the possibility of high-performance electric vehicles, that drove him to challenge dealer franchise laws across the country and develop his own sales and distribution systems, that cued him to the ways that social media might allow him to establish direct ties with stakeholders, circumvent traditional media, and obviate the need for multiple taken-for-granted corporate activities. And that may eventually lead to Tesla's ceding market leadership to a firm that is less dominated by a single idiosyncratic vision of the industry, that these same factors may have also informed his decisions concerning Twitter and the racist and value-destroying policies that we have witnessed him enact there. Musk's technical foresight, media savvy, and absolutism explain both Tesla and Twitter, both celebrity and now increasingly infamy. So Musk is the canonical celebrity CEO circa 2023. So what can we learn from these two exemplar celebrity CEOs? I'll give you just my 3 comments here. On capitalism, I think both Ford and Musk and their respective firms are products of, for lack of a better phrase, the capitalist mode of production. Ford rode, and Musk is riding, a wave of Schumpeterian creative destruction that distinguishes the capitalist economic development from everything that preceded it. What Clay McShane called the Gelded Age economy readily gave way to motorization. The prospects for internal combustion are less clear. Electrification seems poised to displace gas cars for most applications, but the fate of incumbent manufacturers is still unknown. Here, Musk's recent spate of price reductions underscores the similarity of Tesla and Ford's strategic advantages. The assembly line allowed Ford to repeatedly lower prices and put pressure on the dozens of other new entrants to the industry who were slow to realize the necessity of scaling. Similarly, Tesla's recent price cuts, though puzzling to some observers and leading Wall Street analysts to revisit their price valuations of the stock, I think are best understood maybe through the Chinese context. Many domestic Chinese firms are now actively competing in the EV market, and global incumbent manufacturers are facing increasing price pressure. In the US too, Tesla's relatively high profit margins give the firm room to cut prices and still operate profitably. By contrast, the electric vehicle division of Ford Motor Company, which was forced to match Tesla's price cuts recently, generated a staggering $750 million loss in the first quarter of 2023. We cannot yet know which legacy automakers will be able to profitably transition to survive in the EV transformed market space, but losing money on every sale and making it up on volume will clearly not lead to long-term viability. So for the moment, for the incumbent manufacturers, the moment of reckoning may come soon. Celebrity. What do these two cases tell us about celebrity in capitalism? I shared Julie Sharrock's analysis of the joke books. Analyzing humor gave her a window into how early 20th century Americans were processing the changes that they were experiencing. Ford's personal celebrity and that of the Ford Motor Company benefited from their oppositional framing, etc. I think here too, we see with Musk that celebrity may stabilize the inherently unstable capitalist dynamic. So we somehow look to the celebrity CEO as we identify with them in some way, and it provides us some form of stability in an unstable environment. Finally, democracy. I haven't spoken much about democracy this afternoon, but I hope this talk has brought some further analogies to mind. Our polity is still reeling from the first celebrity CEO presidency. And if it wasn't the last, we may have more trouble ahead. Generally, and probably rightly, most of the conversation about capitalism and democracy has occurred on the political economy side. To boil it down, perhaps unfairly, is it $1, one vote, or one person, one vote? And how do we design institutions that ensure the benefits of entrepreneurial capitalism are shared widely? We can debate how widely, whether, as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says, every billionaire is a policy failure, or pick your number, only the 250 billionaires. But we can all agree that the benefits need to be shared widely enough that the legitimacy of the larger enterprise, the nation state itself, is not undermined. We should be very clear, revolution is not good for business. So, while not directly touching upon these issues, this talk has tried to add a new moderator into the political economy conversation. The social, psychological processes which create and sustain the celebrity CEO may be helping to stabilize and legitimize the larger enterprise that we seek to understand. Creative destruction, the sort of disruptive change that is inseparable from the dynamic of the capitalist mode of production, is highly unsettling. To put it perhaps a little too crassly, Model T may have been the true opiate of the masses. Mass motorization normalized change and brought real benefits to the lives of Americans. Ford's celebrity both arose from and enabled that change. Seeing Ford made Model T approachable. Buying and driving Model T made Ford a celebrity. And I think we could see exactly the same thing playing out here with Musk. So here are a few further questions. Are celebrity CEOs here to stay? Are they part of the sort of new furniture of capitalism? I'm really curious. So, what are the risks associated with this kind of spread of Muskism? So what if every CEO believes that this is how they should behave? What happens when we sort of move fast and break things, the kind of entrepreneurial mindset, to try and govern? And I still don't understand why Musk purchased Twitter. I'm open to your questions. Thank you. You want me to field them, or?
Yeah.
Over here? Sure.
About the dead end, you admit that your analysis hits with Ford and his anti-Semitism and with Musk and his Twitter purchase, or what I would call, before in parallel with Ford, his cynical recreational fascism sign. I'm wondering if it's maybe the vehicle you're driving getting you that dead end, and that vehicle just might be, too much sort of capitalist rationalism. and you are just mistaking those sectors in the psyches of those two actors as being rationally driven. I mean, Ford's anti-Semitism and the things that puzzle you about Musk, why not consider that they are completely rationally irrational, and then move on, or take a psychoanalytic route, or some other, drive some other analytical vehicle, into that puzzlement.
I think it's a reasonable question. I guess I keep, we had a little bit of this conversation last night at dinner about what's going on here, and I'm not a psychohistorian. I've met a few, and I'm a child of analysts, so maybe I can, who knows, but I'm hesitant to, I think we can only go on the evidence we have, and I think it is irrational. I mean, how can you rationalize the virulence of this racism and anti-Semitism? It makes no sense. All we can do is perhaps trace sort of where it came from, daddy issues, or whatever it is. But I think we still have to understand how this is the capitalist piece, is that capitalism puts these individuals forward because they normalize these dramatic upheavals that come with the Schumpeterian creative destruction. And so then they are put on these pedestals, and from those pedestals, who knows, maybe any one of us in this room would have some crazy irrational foible that if I put $200 billion in your bank account would suddenly be revealed. And so I think that's the piece I'm less concerned. I mean, I don't like that people hold these beliefs. That is frustrating to me and makes me scared, much more scared than the technology makes me. But I think we have to, this is the dynamic I want us to and I want to encourage the democracy and capitalism folks to kind of wade into, is how capitalism is generating these the disequilibrating effects that actually then spill back in negative ways onto democracy. I think there was a question in the back that was up early. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
It's hard for me to, I don't know much about Musk, but it's hard for me to think that he can grow to become this great celebrity all on his own. Have you examined the networks of people that have supported him in the past and see if the kinds of same sentiments pervade throughout the people who support him, who got him where he is?
It's a very good question. So about the networks in which he's embedded. Sorry, the question was, how do we see, or could we explain some of Musk's beliefs by looking at the networks in which he's embedded and the people who've supported him along the way? Is that about? And I think it's an interesting question. He is not a particularly well-liked or well-known or beloved figure in Silicon Valley. He's not, I think he's more kind of tolerated and than admired among the sort of the venture capitalists and the sort of the Silicon Valley folks. He's done a lot on his own. He had, I think, I guess Larry Ellison is his friend. I'm not sure what that tells us. Not exactly you know, so I think it's an interesting question. I don't know the answer. I mean, I don't know who's in his phone. If they'd gone to trial, we would have found out. So I think, you know, that may be one of the reasons he paid $44 billion, was to avoid having his, you know, kind of phone records exposed. But so I think it's, you know, you're sort of getting at this question of where does it come from, and you know, I don't think we can know. You know, there's a lot of libertarianism among the sort of Silicon Valley elite. He was partners with Peter Thiel and some of these other people, but I haven't heard Heil Hitler from Peter Thiel. So I think there is something special about Musk's beliefs, and I really just don't understand where they're coming from. There was a question here, and then we'll come up front.
This is really interesting. I wonder if you found parallels between, well, one thing I wanted to say about Musk and Ford, and much like Rockefeller as well, these people who become massively successful, the richest people in the world, naturally would think that they're right about everything. And they tend to believe that everybody else is denying something, but they believe that they're the ones, that there's a conspiracy, right? Yeah. So they might be more given to conspiracism. What I'm curious about is whether you saw in looking at Ford's life, whether you saw a similar determination as Musk seems to show with buying Twitter. And he's talked about Twitter as an important, you know, massively important platform of speech. I think he's pretty sincere that that's the reason he bought it. But did you see in Ford's life a determination to spread his message beyond the Dearborn Independent? I mean, like in that he needed to spread a truth around the world about the Jewish conspiracy.
Yes, it's very clear. So in fact, the reason the International Jew is so widely available is that Ford deliberately published it without copyright, and or, you know, he openly published it. He was encouraging it to be distributed as widely as possible. So that was a very deliberate choice on his part to make it as easy as possible for these views to be as widely disseminated as possible. So I think that is certainly part of his view. And I think you're also right that people, you know, when people get very wealthy, they may not even know that there's anyone who disagrees with them, right? You know, Vladimir Putin doesn't know that anybody disagrees with him. So, you know. Question here? Oh, and then in the back. Sorry.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Professor. Thank you for being here. I was fascinated with your evidence about. Oh, thank you so much. Good afternoon, Professor. Thank you for being here. I was super fascinated with your talk, and I'm always fascinated when people smear Elon as a fascist and anti-Semite. You know, your evidence was the tweet, and I looked up the tweet just because I was curious. You know, it's something that I wouldn't think Elon would do, so I looked it up, and it was actually commenting by someone who posted it, and I'll read the tweet, it's very short. Madagascar wildlife is so unique that over 90% of it are endemic species that can't be found anywhere else on Earth. The reason for that is that it has been isolated for 88 million years from the other land masses, and that's why he tweeted, I wonder what Earth will be like 88 million years from now. I thought maybe the person who tweeted it could have been racist or anti-Semitic, but it turns out he's just interested in science and physics and biology. So I don't deny that the person who retweeted his post and said the 14 days are racist and anti-Semitic, but like, how does that correlate to him being racist or anti-Semitic? Because as a Jew, I don't want to support someone that hates me, you know. But seemingly, from what I see, and I'd be happy to, you know, be presented with contrary evidence. You know, that's not what he was talking about.
Sure. Your point well taken, and this is the genius of Elon Musk is plausible deniability. So if you read down just below the 2 comments I posted, if you scroll down, the next dozen comments are all supporters of Elon saying exactly what you just said. saying, "Oh, come on, that's not what he's really doing. How can you say that?" And so I can't get inside Elon Musk's head, but it just is very, it's the dog whistle, right? We can't hear it, but apparently somebody did. And so that's the part that I think is hard. He didn't sign his name to, Henry Ford did not sign his name to all the anti-Semitic stuff, but it's pretty clear it's what he believed. So I sympathize with the position you're in, but I think, the answer is we don't know. We don't have Elon Musk here to ask him. Maybe, again, as his arc unfolds, as his dramatic narrative from celebrity to infamy, wherever, I don't know exactly where we are on that arc today. Maybe we'll know more someday. Why did you send that tweet? What were you thinking? Why did 88 million stick in your head? It's a good question. So, I'm sorry, there's a comment in the back. You've been very patient.
Thank you very much. I've been following Elon Musk and Tesla since watching the movie Revenge of the Electric Car.
Sure.
I recommend about 12 years ago. And I've been following energy issues, clean energy and global warming for longer than that. So that was one of the reasons why I was curious about Tesla, certainly hoping that it would succeed. And actually, I guess I still do, in spite of the fact that I was buying Twitter and what it might mean. So over the course of the years following, I've seen among other things, three really strange ideas that I was found. One, that we're living in a simulation, sort of like the movie The Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
Two, that you need to keep increasing the human population so it can spread through the galaxy instead of beyond Earth, extend beyond Earth. And the third, most recently, in the past year, he said in multiple venues that we have to defeat the woke mind virus, to use his words. And I'm sorry even to repeat those words, but they are.
I'm sorry, defeat the woke.
The woke mind virus.
Oh, yes, that's right. That is what he calls it.
And in current iterations of that, I find it to be, eliminationist rhetoric. So I'm hoping that the 88 is just random and doesn't mean anything. But I don't know what he means by that. But I'll suggest one thing. And again, I hate to mention even this, but in April of last year, his triplets, his oldest living children, turned 18. And some of you might be aware of this. One of the triplets petitioned the court in LA County to change his name and his gender identity and renounced his father. And this might have something to do with it. I'm sure many parents would have a lot of trouble with that. But he said things like, we must defeat the woke mind virus or nothing else matters. And that's an extreme. And he's also said that he's, has Asperger's.
Yeah, he said that on Saturday Night Live. Yeah.
Right. So that might have something to do with it. Anyway, thanks very much. I'm sorry if there's no question.
No, these are interesting things. I mean, it's always, he does describe himself as a free speech absolutist. I'm not sure what that actually means, frankly. Does that mean he can yell, fire in a theater? Or
it means that he let Trump to say whatever he wants.
Yeah, he re-platformed Trump, but of course, Trump is too proud to admit that Truth Social doesn't. Nobody pays attention to him on Truth Social. There are some very odd things going on in these media backwaters. I can't pretend to really understand them. I always thought woke was good, sort of like you're awake. But it has now been weaponized over the last couple of years, and I don't think I'm more worried about the TikTok mind virus, frankly, than the woke one. But
They're calling the kingship, the coronation woke, because they tried to have, Jewish and Christian,
yeah,
so-
multi-religious services. Sure. So anyway, I think it's really interesting. These are, we're sort of seeing the kind of fraying edges of culture in this way, and he's pushing on that quite aggressively. So I think, the New York Times ran a story a few weeks ago about sort of what Twitter is like today, and the author had this nice metaphor, said it used to be sort of like a dinner party, and now it's gotten late, and the whiskey's being poured in the wine glasses and the cheese tray is being used as an ashtray. There's a kind of darkness and a little bit kind of unraveling feeling to the platform. So I think that's true. Those of us who have been on it for a long time, and it feels different, but it's hard to exactly pinpoint what's going on there and why. So maybe a few comments. Can we come here to Liz and then just in front?
So I would like to move back to capitalism, because I was struck that there's a parallel between Ford and Musk, and I'm wondering if there's more generality here, which is its populist market making, right? That both begin with an opposition to the established elites, whether the dealers, and Musk. The narrative when the first Teslas came out mass market was, yes, I'm starting with a luxury vehicle, but only so that I can have the revenues and develop the technical expertise in order to bring it down market. So there's something interesting about the strategy of creating a mass market, or at least an upper middle mass market, that's common to both. And I was trying to think about whether there are other examples. And the only one I came up with was maybe University of Phoenix, right? That college doesn't have to be a useless luxury good anymore. We can present it in a way that's affordable and fits with your life and is helpful for your job. So I'm wondering if we're seeing not a typical, but at least a somewhat generalizable and repeatable strategy here of bringing populism in as strategy. So I don't know if there's a question there either, but it was a really interesting thought.
It is. Thank you. Yeah, I certainly, that was what I was thinking, and you just said it better than I did. So thank you. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I just wondered about a difference between the two, that Musk is very much a stock promoter. He's got rich. Obviously, Tesla has been successful, but if you valued Tesla on any normal grounds, he wouldn't actually be particularly rich by billionaire standards. And he's got.
Little louder.
Sorry, is that better?
Yes,
Sorry,
much.
it's a strange microphone. So he's got rich by promoting stock particularly effectively. He's been really very successful at that. Whereas Ford didn't do that at all. He in fact refused to even join the stock market. He was an operations man. He got rich by successfully building a really big business, which frankly Tesla, for all its success, still isn't. If it was valued on the same multiple as Ford, it wouldn't really be worth very much. So I'm just interested in that difference, that in some ways the parallel is him and the kind of the 19th century stock promoter types, more than the operational, the people who got rich building big businesses. And maybe I'm completely wrong, but it struck me as a quite important difference.
Well, I think it is. It's certainly it's accurate that Ford basically made money on retained earnings that were paid to himself as one of the principal owners. It wasn't until after he died that the Ford Motor Company was finally listed. It was, the largest IPO of the 1950s, and there were, I think, 255. Every bank, if you ever were an underwriter of a security, you wanted to be on the Ford IPO. So that, but you're right, that was after he died. So I think it's interesting. As I was suggesting, I think Musk knew that at least during the period that we were studying, 2010 to 2020, the product he was selling was the stock. The car had to be good enough, but the thing he was really selling was the stock. That was his narrative. You measure the narrative by the stock price. And he, where he said at one point, he got in trouble with the SEC for this comment that he was going to take Tesla private. There was never a prayer that he was going to take Tesla private, because private, he's in Ford's business and he's got to actually make money. Public, all he has to do is tweet or buy bots to kind of soften the blow when things aren't going so well, and he can keep telling all the stories he wants. So I think it's a very interesting contrast for sure. John, and then here, and then I'll go back there.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a couple of questions that follow up directly from these. So Liz talked about capitalism, and I guess I wanted to ask about democracy, because it seems like, both of them, at some moment, what's a business strategy, the kind of populist market building, crosses over into a political project. So why isn't, enough? It's because there's a larger kind of political vision that they're trying to promote. And I guess, one question is, when does that happen, or how do we understand that moment where a business strategy becomes a larger politics? And then second, on the comparison, I was waiting for Muskism to kind of show up, but if we think about Fordism, it has a social vision too, which is we're going to employ hundreds of thousands of men in factories, and that's going to be the basis of industrial society. So there's anti-Semitism too, but there's also a kind of larger social vision. And so with Muskism, is there any content besides just, selling stocks and posting ambiguous tweets that can be interpreted in different ways by different people? Is that it, or is there some kind of larger social imagination of what the world should look like, and how the politics of Muskism, is going to promote it and create it?
Yeah, it's both really interesting questions. To the question of when the political project kind of enters the scene, I really don't know. It's a fascinating question. I think we should interview the world's billionaires, or maybe the 100 millionaires about to become billionaires, and find out sort of like, where do we need to stop you from going in some way? Because I think it has to happen in some way that, all of a sudden you have generational wealth, and then you say, what do I really care about? Oh, immigrants, Bolsheviks, and Jews, or whatever. So I think that's it. And on Muskism, I think we're still kind of waiting to see I think there are a lot of people running around in Silicon Valley trying to figure out what it takes to be Elon Musk, what it means to kind of behave like Elon Musk. I don't have Asperger's, but how could I pretend I do so I can be as a kind of brutally effective as he is? So I think that is actually happening. And I think Musk has this kind of the Ubermensch kind of ideology of having as many kids as he possibly can and spreading his seed around the world, and so I mean the word Muskism I get from Jill Lepore, who has this very nice podcast series called The Evening Rocket that looks at kind of the history of Musk and his kind of how he kind of came, it's her best guess of how he came to his ideas. So I think we're still going to have to wait to see what that project produces. Up here in front.
Thank you so much for your talk. So in a similar vein, I've been wondering about the consequences of this celebrity CEO status.
Sure.
Do you see it as creating a, I guess, pre-fit Model T style stereotype for future CEOs? Do you see it as creating this cult of personality for CEOs that others will try and replicate, that has repercussions that issue into the political and social realms? I guess I'm just wondering, comparing celebrity CEOs versus non-celebrity CEOs, what's the direct impact of that celebrity status?
It's a very good question. Thank you. I think, there are, so I would, some of my management colleagues have looked at, kind of tried to rank CEOs by celebrity and then look and sort of correlate firm performance with degree of celebrity. And so there is some, I think what we know perhaps is that so high status firms, celebrity firms, may be more likely to pursue certain types of strategies, or so I think there are, we should be able to find some correlations. I think the question of what does it matter? Like, what are the consequences of the existence of the celebrity CEO? I think is more to the topic of the democracy and capitalism forum of, like, well, why do we have these people? Why does it matter who the CEO of the company you're buying your car from is? Why do you care? You shouldn't care. You should just care about, do you like the product? But somehow there's and I didn't talk about, there's a whole sort of the history of the PR industry, the history of advertising, these communication shops, and the kind of, there's a whole industry exists to generate celebrity, and that does, I think, date back to Hollywood in the 20s and the silver screen and some of these other, so I don't want to kind of deny the importance of that, but I guess my point would be, well, why do CEOs have this celebrity? Why aren't there celebrity doctors, or other, like, there's so many better types of individuals to venerate and admire. Why are we admiring those people? There's nothing special about them at all. So that's the challenge. That's the puzzle.
It's distraction and it's decoration.
Okay. Well,
so it takes you away from just looking at the dry numbers and knowing the facts and creating an illusion of an atlas. In Musk's situation, you think he's Atlas. I myself thought he was Atlas.
Many do. Okay, there was I think this gentleman with the sport coat on the left there had his hand up for a while. And then, are we doing got a few more minutes? I don't want to keep people.
We can take more questions.
Okay, sure.
It's up to you.
No, that's fine. Go ahead, please.
There's a Francis Ford Coppola movie, Tucker, which tells the story of someone who tried to make a somewhat innovative car to compete with the big three, and he was basically crushed, and part of the crushing was political. And another interesting part of capitalism is when the cable TV industry started competing with the big networks, and there was competitive entry into telecommunications, they had difficulty getting financing. And Michael Milken promoted what were called junk bonds to fund high-risk competitive entry ventures. He was indicted for insider trading on, in a way, rather dubious legal theories, which kind of shows that maybe creative destruction, because it has opponents, and maybe there's an oligarchic kind of cartel spirit in capitalism, which then has co-opted regulation, that in order actually to make a creative destruction innovation, you do have to be pugnacious in fighting a political fight. So I wonder whether, at least in the Musk
case, especially getting around car dealers like that
sure.
would be a huge political battle. So successful creative destruction may require a certain amount of promotion, which then can maybe go hog wild into self-promotion.
Well said. This gentleman here, and then.
So you didn't discuss the most famous and celebrated CEO, Donald Trump. Maybe he was not really CEO. It's hard to tell. This is why you omit him. However, I would argue that what you call Muskism is just like Trumpism. If you look, for example, it's very important part. For example, Donald Trump not support war in Ukraine, and Musk also does not. This is very critical opinion, in addition to others. And so it looks like all these Musk statements, it's Trump light statement. It's Trump opinion made a little different. And we know that Trump, for example, anti-Semite, nevertheless that his daughter so-called Jew, but it doesn't matter because all this right-wing sort of anti-Semite support him. It's light, with Musk it's light, like anti-Semite, I would say. So basically, he just using Trump model how to become celebrity and maybe put his like genes everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I certainly, there's a very strong similarity in kind of style between Musk and Trump. I sort of, Trump is sort of the unindicted co-conspirator of this paper, right? He's there in the background as, and I think I mentioned, the first, we've just survived, I guess he was a celebrity CEO. I'm not sure what he was actually managing, but, he's certainly a celebrity and was acutely aware of how he presented himself oppositionally, the populism, that's his stock in trade. So I think there's something there. And Trump is perceived as a successful business person, which is, of course, again, completely puzzling because all he's done is waste money. If he'd literally put the money he'd inherited in the bank, he'd actually be rich. So anyway, I think the question there's something there, and the relationship between Musk and Trump is they clearly see some things in very similar ways. I don't know if they're sitting there talking on the phone to each other saying, oh, I'm going to retweet this 88 million thing. It's hard to know. John Padgett, and then we'll go back.
My question has to do with the technology of fame. And you mentioned Henry Ford based on newspapers and Musk based on Twitter, but you could also mention a lot of other examples. Andrew Carnegie based on philanthropy, and Steve Jobs based on theater, and so forth. There are various ways in which many rich capitalists have tried to manage. J.P. Morgan based on insider networks. Various ways in which rich capitalists try to manage their image and fame. So my question to you is, can you speculate on what difference that technology makes, if any, on the development of the markets themselves? When you think of the Twitter example, the Musk, you think of echo chambers and so forth, the sort of the closure of one group on one side of the other, a very segmented type of market, segmented audience sort of structure. If you push on that variable and say, what is the implications of that for the development of electronic cars, you would predict that there'd be this very segmented type of market. You know, some guys are gung-ho and some guys are sort of thumbs down, and you know, it wouldn't turn into the Model T at all. And so the whole Biden, et cetera, vision of taking over America with electronic cars is doomed if you push that variable too hard. So I just wonder if you think there's a connection between the technology of fame and the development of markets themselves.
Sure, I think I'm very wary of, you know, as a cultural historian of technology, I'm very wary of tech determinism. You know, oh, well, the, you know, stirrup gave us mounted shock combat and feudalism. You know, I think we need to be a little wary of kind of that falling into the determinism. But I do think that technologies, you know, Steve Jobs was alive during the age of Twitter, but he was not a tweeter. He didn't have that skill or that kind of, and it's very clear, you know, back to the question about Trump, you know, Trump, I remember someone said when Twitter went from 140 to 280 characters, that, you know, they said Trump was so much better at 140 characters, that like 280 he kind of lost focus, like it was too long for him. You know, so I do think there are people who that are better able to exploit different technologies. So, you know, radio, you know, there's some speculation about, you know, radio and the rise of Nazism in the, you know, in Germany. So, you know, I think there's we can find ways to, you know, after the fact, we can tell stories that make it look like it was about a certain technology. But I do think in each instance, we want to look at the relationship between the individuals and the technologies they're using. So, you know, Steve Jobs had a gift for theater, for presentation. The demo was sort of the métier for Steve Jobs. And I think for Musk, he's got a gift. He's a good tweeter. You know, I'm not much of a tweeter. It takes me too. I'm like, should I say that? You know, I don't know, not me. But so I think it's reasonable to think about the different platforms, if you will, kind of encouraging certain types of communication. And I think that even the communication theorists would agree that, you know, Snapchat is going to, you know, look different than YouTube, than Twitter. And what the future happens, who knows? You know, that's okay. Maybe one more. This gentleman's been waiting a long time.
Yeah, I'm interested in what you think about Musk's recent joining this movement to compel a 6-month pause in the development of general artificial intelligence. It would seem like, given everything you've said, the Schumpeterian move fast and break things, this would be exactly to his taste. Also, as a believer in the matrix model of reality, which is basically a myth of AI and a world controlled by intelligent robots, by a massive computer. And yet he's saying, no, this is too dangerous. We have to stop. And he's joined about 1,000 CEOs, intellectuals, computer scientists, including one of the godfathers of AI, Jeffrey Hinton.
Sure.
Saying, oh, we have to slow down, slow down. So how does this fit?
It's a great question. It's very, very puzzling. I think, you know, my kind of cynical take on it is that it's taking him a little time to get his AI company up to speed. You know, and so he's a little late to the party, and that's, he wants to try and hold everybody back while he tries to catch up.
I think that's exactly right.
But, you know, but I think, you know, we certainly, all the incentives that are set up right now for AI are wrong. If there's any danger, we're certainly underweighting that. And I think, I mean, I'm not particularly apocalyptic about AI, but it certainly, you know, if there's even a slight chance of something really bad happening, I'd rather we go a little more slowly. Sure.
It's also a good distraction, I think, for what he's really doing.
Yeah.
He's joining the movement.
Yeah. So.
It's led by a lot of people who I think are quite hysterical.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, so is that maybe we'll end it there. Thank you very much for your questions. It's really nice to speak to you.
Thank you for coming, and we have a reception on your way out.
Yeah.